So we have the latest inductee into the 2021 WWE Hall of Fame class, and it's none other than the former devil himself, the former rival, the former president of WCW, and later on the general manager for Monday Night Raw, my favorite general manager in WWE history. It's Eric Bischoff. You can see it there. He has been announced as the latest inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame. Now, I'll read a bit of the WWE statement before going into what the plans were, how this has been announced, all that kind of fun stuff. So Eric Bischoff, a pioneer behind the scenes in sports entertainment, as well as an incredibly entertaining performer in front of the camera, this is WWE's statement, is the latest inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame's class of 2021. He was surprised with the news of his induction on WWE After The Bell, which you can listen and subscribe to on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Nice podcast plug by WWE there. He will enter the WWE Hall of Fame during the 2021 induction ceremony, which will take place on Tuesday, April 6th, streaming exclusively on Peacock in the United States and on the WWE Network around the rest of the world. Now, this certainly actually caught a lot of people off guard, but I'm so glad that Eric Bischoff's finally, it's way overdue. It's way overdue, isn't it? But of course, the former WWE Raw general manager, Eric Bischoff, is set to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Bischoff will be part of the class in 2021 alongside the likes of Molly Holly, as well as the class of 2020 next month. Now, as I mentioned, on this week's After the Bell podcast, SmackDown commentator and host of the show, Corey Graves, had Eric Bischoff as his guest. Graves made the announcement to Bischoff that he will be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. An emotional Bischoff was thankful and surprised by the announcement. Here's what Eric Bischoff had to say, quote, "Wow, thank you. I don't know what quite to say. Wow, that's awesome. It'll take a few minutes. Wow, it's all I got. For a guy that won't shut the hell up on his own podcast, I don't have anything to say. I'm just speechless. Wow, this is going to take a minute. I'm not going to lie to you, because every year around this time I get emails and social media asking. I've always been pretty good about keeping it out of my mind. I don't think about it, never have to any real degree, but you look at some of the names associated, many of the names, all of the names with the WWE Hall of Fame. I'm going to personalize this one for me. The thing that occurs to me now, when I first started working in sports entertainment for Vern Gagne in 1987, I knew nothing. I was a big wrestling fan. I had no experience. It was a wide-eyed opportunity for me and put Vern up on a pedestal, and to think that if someone would have come up to me and said, in 2021, you and Vern Gagne are going to be in the WWE Hall of Fame, my head would have exploded. Now, Bischoff said that being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame is overwhelming. Bischoff said he loves Hall of Fame events and calls it special. So there you go. There you go. Bischoff is in the WWE Hall of Fame, or is going to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He's been announced for this year's class alongside last year's class as well. And it's well overdue. It's well overdue. I think it's certainly a little bit surprising, I would say. And I don't really want to get into, too much of the politics of it, especially WWE politics. I always find them so dull and boring and overstated, and people can talk about them until the cows come home. But the only surprising thing that I think about it is that just Eric Bischoff, since leaving WWE in 2019, has kind of had this loose affiliation with AEW, hasn't he? In the sense that he's appeared on AEW, I think, on two separate occasions. He obviously had the debate between he and Orange Cassidy, and I also believe he hosted, was it the Inner Circle sort of war room or something like that, question and answer. Eric Bischoff was on there as well, asking questions to Chris Jericho and that time MJF. And it kind of felt like after he had departed WWE, because of course he was the executive director of Friday Night SmackDown in 2019, we'll touch on that in a second, but it kind of had felt like that, okay, now that he left WWE, he was going to be affiliated with AEW, and of course that made a lot of sense, because AEW, of course, Dynamite is on TNT Wednesday night, so Bischoff appearing on Dynamite on TNT was kind of a homecoming, and it felt really special considering that Eric Bischoff was the guy that launched Monday Nitro on the very same network. He launched Monday Nitro on TNT back in the 1990s. He was the guy that went up against the WWE and Monday Night Raw in the Monday Night Wars during the 1990s. Helped really, you can talk about the different boom periods of pro wrestling, rather, not just WWE, but pro wrestling in general. And you can talk about WWE in the 80s when Vince McMahon Jr. first came into power, and Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and all that kind of stuff. Was it the Rock and Wrestling Connection and MTV and all that kind of stuff. But without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest boom period and the most successful period in the history of professional wrestling is in the late 1990s when it comes to the Monday Night Wars. And Eric Bischoff is a massive, massive part of that. He just is. Now, I know some people over the years, and maybe this comes from WWE's ability or want to rewrite history, which is true sometimes, the way that they perceive and the way they talk about WCW and the way that WCW has kind of been spun throughout history through the eyes of WWE is that they were this terrible company, never did any good stuff and just had all this money and they blew through all of this money, and that is partially true. In the sense that they did have Ted Turner's checkbook, and they did bring across the big stars like Hulk Hogan, like Roddy Piper, like Macho Man Randy Savage, all of those names, Bret Hart eventually, that is true. But what often gets forgotten about when it comes to WCW is for a period of time, I mean, not only was that program white hot in terms of Nitro and the company being white hot, but they delivered some fantastic content. WCW Monday Nitro in late 96, after the NWO became a thing, or really once Scott Hall and Kevin Nash got there and really the NWO storyline began, and in 1997, that's just great content. That's great pro wrestling. If you go back and watch it, and that's what I always encourage people to do when they like to trash WCW, because of course there is a lot of material there if you want to trash WCW. But WCW in the late 96, 97, and even parts of 1998 as well, it's a great program. It was a great program, Nitro. And I think that often gets forgotten about. And I know people like to say that Eric Bischoff just got lucky and he didn't have a clue what he was doing, and the NWO concept he stole from Japan. And again, parts of that might be true. Bret Hart till this day will completely just go crazy if you mention the name Eric Bischoff about how much of an idiot he is and how clueless he is and all that kind of stuff. But you can't get lucky that often. And I think that's the case with Eric Bischoff. And if you listen to Eric Bischoff's podcast, 83 Weeks, and you listen to the mindset and you listen to his philosophy on how to write television, not just booking pro wrestling, this is where people get confused with Eric Bischoff. Was he a great booker in terms of WCW? Well, he wasn't really the booker. 1996, 97, that was Kevin Sullivan. Eric Bischoff was an executive producer. That's where he's at his best. It's producing television. And Eric Bischoff, as a producer of television, whether that's pro wrestling or not, is very, very good. You even listen to when he talks about his run in TNA wrestling back in 2010 to however long he was there, 2013, I think, something like that. And again, he wasn't massively involved in the creative. He did at certain points, and the points that he was involved in the creative in TNA wrestling, it was good. People like to say about how terrible TNA wrestling was in 2010 and 2011 when the Bischoff-Hogan era first started, but Eric Bischoff was just a talent and maybe a producer of the show at that point. Eric Bischoff didn't get into creative in terms of TNA until sort of 2012, 2013, and they had good stuff then. People can crap all over the aces and eights. I loved it. I love that gimmick, and you can tell that's Eric Bischoff's gimmick because it's all motorcycle stuff. So, I mean, I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but my point being that I think a lot of people like to criticize Eric Bischoff, and again, there's lots of material there to do so. But I really don't subscribe to the narrative that he lucked his way into defeating the WWE for 83 weeks. There isn't a lot of luck. I mean, there's probably some involved there, but you have to have a plan. You have to have a strategy. And look, this is a guy that turned a company like WCW that for every single year was making losses. He turned it into a company that was making millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of profit. He was selling out arenas. He was doing live events that were having 20,000 people there. And he is partially responsible for the rise of WWE because he forced them to be competitive. He forced them to change. He backed Vince McMahon into a corner and said, look, you have to change. You have to alter the way you produce television, change your product, change your outlook, change your storytelling. Everything you've done, you have to change. Otherwise, you're going out of business. Eric Bischoff's responsible for that. And that his contributions to the business for that alone can't be undersold. And then after that, this is a guy that, what a hell of a career he has had, because after all that success he has in WCW, and then obviously it goes out of business, and there's so much stuff to talk about when it comes to Bischoff, isn't there? I mean, first of all, there was a period of time in 2001 he was going to buy WCW, right? Was it Fusion Media? He was going to purchase WCW. They were going to go on a break, and basically they were going to run it out of Las Vegas. There was going to be a pay-per-view called The Big Bang. They were going to have a complete reset. I think Don Callis and Joey Styles were going to be the commentary team, all of this kind of stuff. And then obviously the deal falls through and WWE purchases WCW, and the rest is history. But again, what would have happened if he had purchased it? Would WCW still be around today? Personally, I think it probably would have been. I don't know if Bischoff's going to be in charge. Well, would have been in charge still, but I think it's a case of TNA wrestling. TNA wrestling has died 1,000 deaths over and over again, but they're still around today because there was always someone there to purchase it. And I think just at the time in 2001, that just WCW had the deal in place, and then obviously it got pulled because of the Time Warner stuff about them not giving Eric Bischoff the time slot on TNT, and that was the equity really. That was what made the deal financially viable. Otherwise, they were just purchasing nothing essentially with no TV deal. That's why the deal fell through, and then WWE they happened to be there to pick up the pieces, and then the rest is history. After that, Eric Bischoff comes in as just a talent at WWE, once thought impossible, and even today it's one of the best debuts on Monday Night Raw history just because of the shock. And I think the way they did it was actually a bit of genius by WWE, frankly, because what they could have done, they could have just had Eric Bischoff come out there, Vince McMahon make the announcement, Eric Bischoff's general manager of Raw, and he comes out, everyone goes crazy. They could have done that, but they didn't. Right before Vince McMahon is about to make that announcement, they do a backstage segment where Booker T is being interviewed. I think it's by Jonathan Coachman, and they say, who do you think it's going to be? What do you think? Eric Bischoff just appears, and he shakes his hand and says, "Nice to be working with you again." And the crowd, you can hear the crowd. It's one of those great moments where you can hear the crowd, but you can't see them because it's a backstage segment. You can hear the crowd, they just explode. They just go, "What the hell is going on? Why is Eric Bischoff, Eric Bischoff, again, it just makes your head explode. Why is he on Raw?" And the reason they did that is because even back then, this is 2002, even back then, WWE was playing on, okay, people are going to start calling people up, people are going to start saying to their friends, "You watching Raw? Well, if you're not, you've got to be watching it right now," because Eric Bischoff, yes, Eric Bischoff, the former president of WCW, the rival, the guy Vince McMahon hates the most, he is on Monday Night Raw. And then he comes out, and him and Vince McMahon, they shake hands, and then they hug on stage. It's just such a moment. It's such a moment. And then Bischoff, at the time, the on-screen authority role wasn't exactly anything new. We'd had Vince McMahon, we'd had commissioners and all that kind of stuff. But when they were going with this general manager concept, I mean, maybe it's because he was the first of Raw, but he just was the best. And again, that goes to, why Eric Bischoff is a Hall of Fame worthy candidate, not only because of his contributions to the business alone in WCW, which that alone would just make him a first ballot Hall of Famer anyway, but then as a talent, he was great. As a general manager on Raw, he was fantastic. His rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin, some of the segments they had throughout it was sort of 2003, 2004, all of it was fantastic. I loved it. Eric Bischoff, his rivalry, I think really his rivalry with Steve Austin was some of the best stuff he did in WWE in terms of being a talent. But he also had feuds with the likes of John Cena as well, towards the end of him being the general manager, and that was a lot of fun. Even the way he was fired, the whole courtroom stuff, I thought was great. And he had some moments with Vince McMahon as well, and every time he appeared in the ring with Vince McMahon, again, it would just make your head explode because you think, that's the chairman of WWE and the president of WCW. That would have never happened. And then at certain points, when they were bringing back ECW, which was in reflection a bad idea, but not so much in 2005 when they were just doing the One Night Stand pay-per-view, the first one, and it was just ECW coming back for just a one-night thing, and that was exciting because it was still relatively fresh and it hadn't been done before, and there was a desire to see ECW again at that point. When they had the segments of having Vince McMahon, Eric Bischoff, and Paul Heyman representing, WWE, and Bischoff was essentially, he was representing Raw, but he was representing WCW in that case. He was playing up WCW. And then Paul Heyman representing ECW. You had, the three heads of the three biggest promotions in North America in the 1990s in one place, inside the same ring for the first time ever. It was great. And I know they'd kind of done that a little bit before because they had Heyman as general manager of SmackDown, which again, that picture was amazing. The three biggest heads of the three biggest promotions in North America in the 1990s. One was the chairman of WWE, one's the general manager of Raw, one's the general manager of SmackDown all at the same time. That was great. But then after that, he leaves and he does the whole controversy creates cash book, and then eventually goes to TNA Wrestling and all that kind of stuff. But he came back. Shockingly, very shockingly, in 2019, he came back as the executive director for SmackDown, and it really caught a lot of people off guard. Paul Heyman was announced as the executive director of Raw. Didn't really surprise people. Obviously, he'd been with the WWE for a while, just as a talent, but there had always been reports that they wanted to get Heyman in, and he was kind of doing a bit of producing, helping out certain talents, all that kind of stuff. So that wasn't surprising. The Eric Bischoff one was surprising. And it just didn't work out. And I think, ultimately, was that surprising? Not really. I think most people didn't expect it to work out. every time you ever hear a story that Vince McMahon is delegating power to people and is delegating positions of authority to people, you know for a fact it's never going to last, because historically it's never lasted. Whether it's Bill Watts, whether it's whoever, every time authority is given out, Vince McMahon is such a, a micromanager, he has to bring it back. He has to bring it back. And that's not the case with Eric Bischoff. As far as what we've heard, it just wasn't the right fit. And Bischoff didn't fit into what is today's current WWE corporate environment. Does that mean Eric Bischoff was unprofessional or anything like that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was just a case of it didn't work out. And Bruce Pritchard is now in the position of both of those things. He's not only the executive director of Raw, he's also the executive director of SmackDown too. I mean, Bruce Pritchard is the most political animal in the world. He really is. So it was a pleasant surprise to round it off. It was a pleasant surprise when it was announced earlier today that Eric Bischoff is going to be the latest member of the 2021 Hall of Fame class. Is he going to be the headliner? Well, at the moment it's him and Molly Holly. No disrespect to Molly Holly, but he should be. I mean, we could find out in the coming weeks. I don't know. Considering it's all going to kind of be one event, I think the headline is still going to probably, you would think, be Batista, considering he's still the biggest name out of all of those guys. So it will certainly be interesting, but it's way, way overdue. So congratulations to Eric Bischoff. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Eric Bischoff being announced as the latest member of the 2021 WWE Hall of Fame class? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, got the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or having come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.